So we're recording. I hope that that won't stop you from asking any questions throughout. Normally, it obviously when I'm doing these presentations, I can obviously give you some information here, but it's also really important for me that I can customize it as much as possible to your needs. So if you have any questions that are coming up, please do feel free at any point in time. And we have Angela here. Welcome to the
I'm
presentation,
trying
Angela.
to sort out. I'm going to send the link to parents again in case there was some
Yeah.
understanding, but it's everyone got the same link.
All right. All right. So we're just slowly going to
I'll
start.
work away in the background and listen. You go ahead.
That's great. And we are recording in case people want to see it later on. So we're going to start it here and the art of co-regulation. And it may seem odd that I'm calling it the art, but what I'm finding after years in the role of a psychologist, what I'm really finding is that co-regulation can absolutely be an art. Does everybody know what I mean when I say co-regulation, or is that sort of a foreign concept?
It's a two-way process
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
where we
oftentimes,
both involve. Yeah.
100%. We have self-regulation and then we have co-regulation, right? And co-regulation absolutely can be a two-way process. But the younger the child is, it can also be a little bit more of the two-way processes that I'm pouring all of my emotions into you, mom or dad, and you fix them. And in the early stages of life, that is what regulation is there. There is no level of self-regulation. So that's what we are developing over time. And just like we're going to school and we're learning how to read and write, we're learning how to calculate, we're developing all of these skills. Understanding my own emotions and understanding how to cope with those emotions is also a skill that we develop over time. So what I'm finding is that is something, again, after years and years in the industry, is something that I'm still trying to get better at. But what we're going to be going through today. Oh, yeah. First of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of didactics into the neurology of the brain. How does it function? How does the different centers in the brain function? And why is that important for when we self-regulate or co-regulate? I'm also going to be talking about what kind of techniques we can have to implement in our communication style with the younger one with regards to how can we help them to co-regulate. Then I'm going to go into a little bit about what I'm doing in my sessions, and then I'm also going to cover other therapeutic modalities, because essentially what I'm trying to give you in this presentation is the foundation of good co-regulation. But there are also times where co-regulation simply isn't enough, and psychotherapeutic intervention is essential, and that would oftentimes be with stress or with neurodiversity, or if there's a high tendency to something like overthinking, for example. Okay, so this is how the brain roughly is divided. Obviously, there are hundreds and hundreds of centers in the brain, but if I am to give the most rough division of the brain, this would actually be it. So at the bottom here, what we're seeing is the reptilian brain, and this is where we have a function starting with F. Can anybody guess what it is? It is the fight or flight. So if there's a lion right behind me, and by the way, thank you for everybody dropping in now. I can see there's a couple. At the bottom of the brain, that's the most primitive part of the brain. That's the part of the brain that we especially use when we're out on the savannah, and let's say there's a lion behind us, and we just need to survive. During that time, that part of the brain kicks in and forces us to just absolutely run away. I'm going to get more into that, but the second part of the brain here is the limbic brain, and that's where most of our emotions is. So it's more complex than just the fight or flight. So whereas the bottom part of the brain here is all about survival, the middle part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, is about like anger, jealousy, sadness, upset, stress, all of those. And then at the top of the brain here, this is really what sets us apart from more primitive species. We have the neocortex, and that's really what allows us to do rational thinking, delay gratification, make plans for the future. Think about if I have 10,000 dirhams now and I want to make them grow, maybe I should put them into the stock market. Which stock is going to go up in the next 10 years? That stock. That's this part of the brain. It's also that part of the brain that we're using when we're learning social skills, when we're learning to control ourselves, when we're solving complex problems. And therefore, if we're engaging in things that are maybe related to inappropriate behavior, it's oftentimes this part of the brain that we want to get online, because that's the part of the brain that regulates behavior. It's not this part, it's not this part, at least not in a controlled brain. It's all about the top part of the brain here. So neocortex is what we need for logical thinking. The activity in the neocortex is the highest when we're in a calm state. I'm going to get into that as well. And strong emotions. So when we have emotions down here in the limbic brain or in the reptilian brain, we have less activity up in the neocortex. Last ones, learning actually deactivates when we're emotional. So when we're stressed, when we're upset, when we're super sad, that's when the centers in the brain that are involved in learning new behaviors reduce the most. And when we're calm, that's when you see that there's the most activity in the parts of the brain that are involved in adaptive behaviors. Last bit about neurology here. We have essentially two sort of systems in the brain. One that's involved in protecting us. So on the right here we have the fight or flight, and on the left side here we have the calm and relaxed state. So for example, if there's a lion right behind me, this system is going to activate. It's going to increase my lung capacity. It's going to increase my heart rate. It's going to reduce everything that's involved with the immune system, digestive systems, and it's going to excrete a lot of stress hormones, epinephrine, and also glucose, which essentially gives us an adrenaline boost. All of that is super, super, super important if we're in this situation. The issue is the brain cannot differentiate between this situation and this situation. So the same hormones are being excreted in a situation when there's a lion right behind me and I just need to run, and when I'm fearing for my job, or I'm fearing that I'm going to fail the exam. And that essentially means that in situations, for example, if we're worried about an exam or about our job, that's a situation where we need the logical part of the brain the most, but it's when it's the least active. And that's why it's so important that we learn how to self-regulate so that we can get it. Rada, did you have a comment? All right. It's so important.
No, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Rada. It's important that we know how to self-regulate, but when we're young, we can't. So we really need our parents to co-regulate for us. And in that process, we're learning how to self-regulate. When we can do that, when we can become stronger and faster at regulating, we can also get this part of the brain more online quicker. All right. So as young ones, as babies, we don't self-regulate whatsoever. We just need to be fed. We need to be dry, warm. We need to sleep. That's how we are regulated. Parents do that for us. As we get older, with the years, we can kind of learn how to regulate with smaller situations. For example, I'm hungry, but it's okay. I know that I can manage half an hour more. That's fine. The situations that we can deal with at a later age becomes more and more complex. For example, in the teenage years, I can sort of learn how to deal with stress related to school. But still, throughout these years, there will be times where we are pushed beyond what we can manage ourselves, where co-regulation really becomes important. And when adults are able to co-regulate for there and sort of make sense of the internal chaos, that's where we can learn from those situations. And Just as with anything in school, at work, when we're exposed to a problem the first time, it doesn't really make sense. We need help from our supervisor or from a teacher to really understand what is this task about, how do I solve it. And it's the same with a child who for example, is experiencing exam stress for the first time. If they don't know how that feels, if they don't know how to deal with that. First of all, they're getting stressed, and secondly, they're getting incredibly frustrated because they don't even know what stress is. And when we don't know, sort of like quote unquote, what the enemy is, we don't know how to deal with it. And uncertainty breeds anxiety. So that's why emotional intelligence, understanding why I'm reacting the way that I'm doing, is so important. For example, some years back, my nephew was 5 years old, and we were playing outside in the garden. This was in Denmark, where I'm from, and we were playing around. We had the best time of our lives, and he fell and hit his knee, and he started to bleed. Not that much, but when he saw the blood, he got so scared, and he cried as if he had just experienced the worst pain of his life. So if I picked him up at the time and told him, don't worry, it's not too bad, I don't think that would have helped that much. So what I did instead was I picked him up and said, wow, you were just having the best time of your life. You were having so much fun. And then suddenly you fell, and then there was a pain in your knee and there was blood. I can just imagine you got shocked and so scared. And what happened was he looked at me and said, yeah, I was really, really scared at that time, of course, still with tears in his eyes. But when I had talked him through the situation, he was able to look at the blood on his knee and say, oh yeah, but it actually doesn't hurt that much. Should we play again? Because suddenly the emotions and the pain that he felt, he knew what he was dealing with, and he could realize that this is actually not that scary. And so that's a big part of what I'm doing in my work. And so what we're working on there is developing self-awareness. So that is, why do I react in the way that I do? What situations are causing me to react in this way? What can I do in order to manage those emotions and those situations? And also, how do I affect other people? And if I'm having a conflict with a person, how can I actually change that? How can I manage that situation? And when we're able to develop those areas, what the kids are telling me is that, yeah, the dangers are still out there. I can still sometimes be stressed. I can still feel pain, but at least now I know how to navigate it. I know how to identify the situations that can hurt me, and if I'm getting hurt, I know how to deal with it. Okay, now I sort of covered the didactics. So now we're getting into like, what can we actually do in a situation where a child is highly dysregulated? Before I'm going into that, does anybody have any comments, any questions, anything that while I'm talking, they're thinking it would be nice if I could touch on a particular situation or topic? Oh, and I don't think I can see my chat actually. So if anybody has anything, oh, I can see it here. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any questions so far. Okay. So essentially, the key takeaway so far is that when I'm trying to change behavior of my child, if let's say Bob is coming back home from school, and for the third time this week he's been doing some kind of mischief. He's been moving around in class. He's been talking in class, or he has pulled some kind of prank. If I come home, or if he comes home and I meet him with, why are you doing this? This is the third time this week. Like, this really could kind of affect your relationship with the school. This might eventually affect your future, your university. options and so forth and so forth. If that's why if that's how I'm meeting Bob at that time, essentially what I'm doing is I'm activating his emotional part of the brain. And so that means that I'm essentially forcing him into a position where his brain is at a disadvantage in terms of learning new behaviors and understanding logic. So what the most important thing there is that I try to get him into a calm state so that his logical brain goes online. And the number one, okay, I spoiled it totally here, but I was going to ask the question, how do you do that? And the answer to that is the best way to make a person feel calm is make them feel understood. It's not about offering them solutions, offering them advice. That comes later on. But solutions and advice, that's all logical. And usually, especially for a child, their logical brain is not online. So all that they need in that particular situation is to feel safe. They need to feel understood. They need to feel that there's a person here who understands my situation. Because if they understand my situation, that puts them in a situation, or that puts them in a position where they can give me good advice. If somebody starts to give us advice and we feel that they don't really understand our situation, we won't trust them. And that's why all of the great advice we as adults have for the kids, we should wait with that till we can see that, okay, now they're actually calm, now they're regulated, now they're taking a deep breath. We can start with that before, but it will not be as effective. And secondly, every time a child is dysregulated, that's an opportunity for learning. That's an opportunity for learning about why did you respond in this way? What happened there? What was triggering you? What was moving inside of you? Are you particularly sensitive to people talking to you in a certain way, in a certain tone of voice? Are you sensitive to loud sounds? Like exploring that first, figuring out what happened there. Once you're calm, once we figured that problem out, now we can get to solve like the real problem. So key takeaway here is once we can make a person feel understood and heard, that's going to regulate them and that's going to take them up into the logical part of the brain. And as a bonus in that process, we're going to help to develop their emotional intelligence, which is going to bolster their resilience for the future. Let me just see. What I'm finding pretty consistently, and you as parents can give me your story as well. But this is what I see in my work pretty much every day, and this is what I hear consistently from parents as well, and it's also what I see in my own relationships with family, friends, and so forth. If I'm going into a discussion, somebody is complaining about either other people or myself. If I try to convince them of my perspective, for example, if somebody is upset at me, saying that I used the wrong tone of voice, or that I said something that was hurtful to them, if I go into that situation, trying to take them and pull them over to my side and make them see my perspective and say, no, it wasn't hurtful because I said that as a joke, they will not feel comfortable, because there's nothing more respectful, there's nothing more calming than a person, instead of taking you over to their side or them, yeah, exactly, you should go yourself over to their side. There's nothing that makes a person feel more calm and respected than you dropping your perspective, dropping your point of view, and going out to their side and saying, do you know what, I can see that when I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, the way that I spoke to you there, like the joke that I made, I can actually see why that was upsetting to you. Can you tell me a bit more? And essentially, what I'm saying there is not that what I did was wrong, but I can say that from your perspective, the person that you are, the situation that you're in, I can actually see why that was hurtful. Can we explore that a bit more together? Conversely, if I say, no, that's not true, because I just said it in the way that I do, and that's my way of making jokes, that we usually only tend to escalate the issue, because this person is trying to have a relationship with me. And if we cannot see things from the same side, then they will not feel safe with us. So usually what will happen in that situation is that they might raise their voice, or they might dig their heels in, just to really, really, really make me understand that what you did was hurtful to me. And what I did can actually be appropriate, but it doesn't matter, because if I'm in some kind of diet with this person, I need to be able to understand their perspective. When I can do that, they can be calm, and we can have a conversation about, is that a way that I can talk to you in the future, or should I actually change the dynamic here? So when I feel misunderstood, I feel attacked, and that tends to dysregulate even more. The best example that I have of this is most likely when I was a brand new psychologist. I was working with a young guy who he definitely had some emotional regulation difficulties, and there was a situation where he had kicked his sister in the stomach because she had used his toy. And the first time that I met him and I heard this story, I was really trying to make him self-reflect, and like I asked him questions such as, well, can you see that maybe like her borrowing your toy is not really warranting you kicking her in the stomach? And he just dug his heels in, and like he was just going on about like, this is my toy, she shouldn't take my toys, and so forth. And it was only when I was able to turn around and not agree with the logic that he had, but agree with his emotions there and say, do you know what? I know that was one of your favorite toys. And I bet that when your sister used your toy, you felt that she was not respecting you. She was not respecting something that was really, really dear to you. And do you know what? If somebody took something of mine and I didn't feel respected, I would get really, really angry as well. And when I was able to do that, slowly you could just see him deflate, because that was the first time that anyone had really tried to understand him. His parents would just shout at him, yell at him, like let him know that what he was doing was definitely inappropriate, which it absolutely was. But he wasn't able to adapt his behavior until somebody actually like tried to see things from his perspective. And what slowly happened in that conversation was that he was able to deflate and slowly over time say, do you know what, I got really, really angry, but maybe I shouldn't have kicked her. Maybe that was a little bit too much. So what was happening there was that he was going from a state of defending himself, essentially from me, because he felt attacked that I couldn't understand his perspective. But when I was able to see things from his perspective, he was able to calm down, to regulate. And in that process, he was able to come over to my side and see things from my perspective and self-reflect. And that's really the goal that we have. And in that process, we also taught him that there are things that are really, really important for him, and he should self-advocate there as well, because he got triggered by people taking what he was referring to as his property. So that was yeah, I guess that's the best examples of that. The main thing that I'm doing when I'm communicating with anyone in my sessions, and this goes both for kids and it goes for teens and adults, it goes for everybody. It also goes for friends and family. But what I'm finding is that it's so easy to say, I hear you. And actually, when we are dysregulated, we all want to be heard. That's a natural part of ending to another person. But when I say, I hear you, I can say that without listening to people. And people don't really react to that, or that doesn't really click for people consciously, but subconsciously. Just saying, I hear you doesn't really help much. That's why when I'm talking to any of my clients, I actually rarely say, I hear you. But whatever they're saying, I try to paraphrase. So, for example, with the boy who whose sister took his favorite toy. What I'm using is I'm saying, do you know when you're telling me that your sister took your favorite toy? When I'm saying that word, essentially what I'm doing is I'm proving to him I'm taking the time out of my day here. I'm not just trying to brush you off. I'm not just trying to smooth things out. I'm not just telling you I hear you. I actually heard you. And you know that because I can paraphrase you, and I wouldn't be able to paraphrase you if I wasn't listening intently. So that's a number one thing. Obviously, that doesn't really make people regulate tremendously, but what it does do is it makes people feel heard and respected. And that makes them listen to what you have to say next. And what I often do there is first of all, I paraphrase. So in the story that they're telling me, I try to paraphrase the most important bits there. And then on top of that, because the classic is, I hear you and I feel you. I understand you. But again, I feel you and I understand you. Those are really, really easy words to say, but it can actually be really, really hard to do that. It can be very, very hard for me that when a boy is coming in telling me that my sister took my toy and I kicked her in the stomach, it can actually honestly be a little bit hard for me to understand that you felt that it was okay to kick your sister in the stomach because she borrowed your toy. So I shouldn't just say that I hear you and I understand you. I should prove it. And I prove that by, for example, labeling emotions. So once I paraphrased what I will oftentimes do, exactly as in the example there, I will say something like, "Do you know what? I can imagine that if somebody took my favorite uh, uh, item that I really hold near and dear, I think that I would get really, really frustrated and I would get really, really angry. Was that what you felt as well?" And that's oftentimes when you can do that, when you can label their emotions, that's when you can make sense of the internal chaos. Because especially for the child, oftentimes they would just feel anger, but they won't really understand the anger. So oftentimes, especially for the younger ones, that can be an experience of, oh yeah, I'm angry because this is something that I really, really care about. And that's what makes me upset. And that's what gives them the enlightenment. And when we understand our emotions, we can, like, it sort of goes by like you name it to tame it, right? So when I'm understanding my emotions, when I'm understanding why they're there, they get much easier to deal with. When we don't understand why I'm reacting in the way that I do, we get really, really frustrated about it. And that means that I'm angry at the situation, but I'm also frustrated with myself because I don't understand why I'm angry. So those two are super, super important. Now, the third part is yeah, equally important, but the two first is really the foundation here. Normally, they won't really make the biggest difference, but it's such an important foundation for the person to trust you. And if you don't have that trust, if you don't have that connection when you're in a situation of co-regulation, you're not going to get anywhere with anyone. And it doesn't matter if it's your child, if it's your partner, if it's your friend, if it's your colleague. So the third thing that I do, and this may seem paradoxical, but as I was talking about before, it's not my job to look at the 6 year and make the child come over to my side and see that it's a 6. It's my job to go over to that person's side and have a look at the 9 that they are seeing. They are not in a state of mind to see that the situation can be seen from two different perspectives. As the adult, that's what I have to do first. Once I do that, then they can calm down, and then we can see things from both perspectives. Yeah. By the way, I just want to repeat here that all of these slides are online. I put the link in the chat box, so you don't necessarily need to take pictures if you would rather have the full slide. So oftentimes, what I would do, as I mentioned just before, is I would literally go in and say that if I was in your shoes, or if I was in your situation, or I can imagine that if that was me, I would have been really, really angry as well. Because what that does is it makes a person feel related to me. it makes them feel that first of all, I'm actually really making an effort here to understand their situation. It's also normalizing their sort of like taboo emotion, because being frustrated, being sad, being angry, oftentimes that's the thing that we as adults are sort of scared of, and we try to tell the children that no, don't be sad, don't be angry, don't be scared, because those are negative emotions. But when I'm able to say that I would have felt the same way, that normalizes that emotion, and that makes the person feel more sort of normal, but also that the way that I'm feeling and that the person that I am is actually completely natural, and it's okay to be the person that I am with the emotions that I have. And again, all of that serves to co-regulate and educate emotionally. The point is here, and I wrote it, or at least a key point here, is that we are not agreeing with the logic. I'm not going in there and saying, oh yeah, you kicked your sister in the stomach. I would have done exactly the same thing, because I wouldn't, and it's inappropriate behavior. But I can agree with the emotion that's behind the behavior. And when I can regulate the emotion, I can also regulate the behavior later on. So I can absolutely say that I can totally understand why you got upset and angry. I do not say I can understand why you kicked your sister in the stomach. That's just an important differentiation there to make. Any questions so far? Otherwise, I'll scoot on to the next slide. And of course, I certainly don't get offended if I get interrupted. Actually, I appreciate when people have questions, so don't feel shy. Next slide here, and I would say that actually, if you're able to master these three, if you can do that fairly consistently, in pretty much any relationship that you have, it will make a difference with your child, with your partner, with your colleague. If you can throw away or put in a box for a couple of minutes your perspective, and just go in and like really try to see things from that person's perspective, that's going to make a tremendous difference in terms of how respected do they feel, how heard do they feel, how much can they regulate. And for some reason, especially for men, we have a tendency to go into the logical mindset. And that means that oftentimes when there is a time of dysregulation or inappropriate behavior, we go directly into what should you have done instead, or what do you need to do in the future. And it's just not the right time, unfortunately. We need to lead with respect and love. We need to lead with understanding, paraphrasing, verbalizing emotions, so that the person that we're talking about is, first of all, making sense of the internal chaos, but also, again, almost nothing makes me feel as respected as when another person who's not me can actually verbalize my emotions, because that tells me that they understand me super well, and that tells me that we can be on the same page. We can reach to a solution together, because this person understands me so well. Thirdly, if they will go out of their way to really go over to my side, say that they would actually, like, they understand me, and they might even have done the same thing, that makes me feel so connected to this person. I think there was a question. Is it possible to get the slide as I came in late? Miriam, thank you for the question. If you're looking at the top of the chat box, I've actually put a link that goes directly to my website, and the slides can be downloaded from there. If for some reason you can't see that link, just let me know and I'll repost it. So I'll do that by the end of this talk. And also, for those who don't know, this talk is actually recorded, so it will also be posted online. Okay. So again, this is a foundation. If you can do that, you are more than halfway at the goalpost. Oh. So there was 1 to 3. We actually have 4 to 6 as well. The last part is once we let them know that we hear you, we understand you, we're willing to take your perspective, then we can start to ask them for more information. Because again, when they feel a little bit calmer, they're able to think more sensibly and logically, and then they can give us more information. And oftentimes in the process of verbalizing the situation that you went through to another person so that it have to make sense, it also starts to make some more sense for myself. And then I'm seeing more parts of the perspective. So what I was talking about before, we're going over to the side to see the 9. In the process of them giving us more information, two things can happen. Either they're actually over time going to come over to our side and see that, oh, this can actually also be a 6. Or in the situation that I was talking about before, maybe I shouldn't have kicked my sister. That can happen. And when that comes from themselves, when that comes from the inside of people, it sticks much more than if I say you shouldn't have kicked your sister. When it comes from the inside out, it's almost more powerful than when it comes from the outside and in, which is why I don't know if you've seen these psychology movies, but oftentimes we don't tell them that, oh, like, do you have you're a very impulsive person, or you're like a very brave person. We ask them questions so that they verbalize that themselves. So like, what kind of personality are you? How do you react to this and that situation? Because again, when it comes from the inside and out, for whatever reason, it's just internalized much better. So that's what we do there. That's called the inquiry. Number 5 is that I can verbalize. Do you know what? When like let's say that I'm the dad there in that situation, I can say that, like, son, like it really gets me sad and upset, because I know that normally you're such a happy boy, you have so many good qualities, and first of all, now we're in a situation where you have kicked your sister, and that's a sad situation. But also, I'm sad because I can see that you're sad. I can see that you got really upset, and that must be just so frustrating for you. So I'm allowed to sort of really explicitly express what the situation is making me feel. Of course, in an empathetic way. In that particular situation, I'm not supposed to say, it makes me really angry that you did this. It should also be with empathy, in the sense that it makes me really sad to see that you got so upset. All right. So that we're showing that not only do I understand the situation, not only am I trying to take your perspective, but I'm actually emotionally invested in this situation, and I'm emotionally invested in you because I love you. And that's the last one here, affirmation, to show that I care. Oftentimes when you're having these difficult situations, and I guess when it comes to affirmation, this especially becomes relevant when we're talking about relationship counseling, difficulties in an adult relationship, where we kind of at times have to give feedback, and we have to say, like, this is something that I need to see change over time. We have to lead with affirmation, in the sense that I care about you. There's things that you do that I just think are so absolutely amazing. I'm so impressed by you. I really think that you're the greatest person in the world. But when you're doing this to me, it makes me feel this kind of way. So like, affirmation is always just really verbalizing explicitly the positive emotions that we have for the other person. So if I'm drawing it back to the situation with the boy again that I was talking about before, that could look like something like it really makes me sad to see that you got so upset and angry. That's because I think that you're such an awesome guy, and I really care about you. Like, you're one of my favorite people in the world. Because for whatever reason, when we get like that recognition and affirmation, again, it makes us feel calm. It makes us feel more safe, and it makes us feel that, oh, I can actually trust this person. And it all goes back to, well, it all goes back to this. When we can calm the emotions, that's when we can go up here. And actually, it may sound weird, but there are times where I'm seeing clients literally for the first 1, 2, or 3 sessions. Pretty much all I'm doing is this. Literally, like just understanding, paraphrasing, seeing their perspective, letting them know that I'm invested, because when I can do that, that's when they start to feel really safe and calm. And that's when they can tell the story. That's when they can tell their whole perspective. And that's also when they can be so calm that they can explore other perspectives on the situation. Okay. I can actually see we've spent a fair bit of time here. Or just put some pictures as well. Now that was actually the foundation of what I had in terms of how do I adapt my communication. In the beginning of this talk, there was a person who asked if this was for everyone or for a select demographic. What I will say is that these techniques, again, they will work with everyone. I'm using it in my work, but also in my private life, and I'm teaching these techniques to pretty much everyone, because the foundations here are just general principles. But for a person with emotional regulation difficulties, and that especially speaks to the neurodiverse demographic, these principles just seems to be one where you have to stick with them for a little bit longer. So essentially, the principle is that they just need a little bit more support in order to get to that calm and logical state. And that's why we have to spend a little bit more time with the verbalizing of the emotions, showing understanding, showing affirmation, before we can actually jump into that logical conversation. Let me just see. Was there anything else?
Can I just ask, in those regulation states, when there's something has just happened and everyone's emotions are high in the situation, just that gap or the interim, rather than going straight into the conversation, do you recommend you start those conversations immediately, even if your emotions are high as a parent or teacher? Or what's the best recommended thing to do to create that space for everyone to get into a state where they can think logically and have those conversations?
Thank you very much for the question, Angela. Actually, the next slide is this. Regulation before conversation is a prerequisite for a healthy discussion. What I mean by that is that what I'm talking about here, like the adaptations to our communication style, usually that works well when we are dysregulated, but not above like a 7, 8, 9, or 10. So when we're between like completely calm and like really, really uncomfortable and a bit stressed, usually we can use them there. But there comes a point where the level of dysregulation is so high that we're not in a good state of mind to have that kind of conversation, especially for the neurodiverse person or the person who's quite young. That's when we have to rely on behavioral strategies. So that means that if I can see that, son, you're so dysregulated that we can't even have a good conversation here, and I want to have a good conversation with you, but the time is not now. Maybe you should just go to your room, punch the pillow as hard as you can, go to the trampoline, do a run, or you can come here and you can have the biggest hug of your life. All of that is completely fine. It's only at the point where we can see that the person is so regulated that we can actually have a conversation that we can start to initiate these techniques. Now, I've written a couple of strategies here, because what I'm finding is that there's definitely like no cookie cutter method for how to actually regulate to the point where I can have a good conversation. It's so individual, and for some people that is literally going to my room, punching the pillow, throw the pillows on the ground, jump on the trampoline, whatever it may be. For other people, it's just listening to music, taking a walk with the dog, cuddle with my cat, doing breathing exercises, puzzles. whatever it is. So that's kind of what you have to figure out with your child or with your loved one. What helps you to regulate there? What kind of strategies can we try? Because the communication techniques definitely work really, really well, but we need to get to a point where we can have that conversation to begin with. And as mentioned, especially for the younger ones, oftentimes it's a behavioral techniques, but there are also times where simple things such as breathing techniques, mindfulness, those can actually work as well. And also for the younger ones, actually, what I'm finding is that the tense, relaxed techniques work really, really well too. Let me just see what I have. So I always feel like I'm putting myself a little bit on the spot here because you guys can see me, but I can't see any of you. So I feel a little bit on the stage. But what I'm going to ask you guys to do now is simply hold up your fist like this, and then when I say go, squeeze as hard as you possibly can. And I haven't said go yet, but we do that for 10 seconds. And when you're doing it, you should almost squeeze so hard that you can feel it all the way up in your forearm here. The principle is that sometimes when you're super dysregulated, it's almost like a volcano. That energy needs to go somewhere, and if it has nowhere to go, it's going to come out in words or behavior. So if I can squeeze and really overexcite myself, then afterwards I'm going to calm down a little bit. And for some people it works not at all, and for other people it's almost like a magical trick. So it's going to be individual how all of you respond, but I'm going to say go in a little bit, and then what I want you to do is just squeeze as I count down from 10 and hold it until I get to 0. And then once you let go, just notice if afterwards you're more or less relaxed. All right, so go. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Now just take a minute just to notice, is there any difference in how you feel in your body? Is there any difference in how you feel in your head, in your chest? And if anybody wants to give any verbal or written input or feedback, feel free to do that.
Yeah, I find that really helpful, but even personally, I find breathing is my best thing. And once I learn to breathe properly, any
Yeah.
situation I find myself in now, I'm like often breathing like Darth Vader, and people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I didn't even notice." So it's like once you learn your strategy, I guess it becomes second nature, that it nearly happens automatically as opposed to you having to stop and do it. So yeah, I think it's really dependent on individuals and what works
Okay.
for you.
Yeah. Thank you
But
for
when it works,
good
it's
feedback.
amazing.
I'm sorry?
When it does work or you find your thing, it is amazing.
It is. It is. And what I will say about all of these strategies that I'm mentioning here, they're all short term. These are not long-term solutions because they don't solve any problems and they don't help us develop emotional intelligence. It's almost like when you're on a train that has run amok, you need to be able to pull the emergency brake. And when the train has stopped, that's when we can start to solve the problem. But these are all techniques that are designed to take you from 10 to a 6, and then we can have a good conversation together. As I mentioned before, it's super individual what actually works for a person. And the next thing that I thought that I could show you today, and Angela, you made a perfect segue for me there. That's mindfulness. That's breathing. It's grounding. And so the next thing that I'm going to be asking you to do is simply to follow my instructions here on the breathing techniques. When we're talking about the nervous system, and I was talking about earlier today how there's a defensive part of the nervous system and there's a calming part of the nervous system. Breathing exercises can activate the 10th cranial nerve, which is called the vagus nerve, which actually impacts and activates the calming part of the nervous system. So what we're going to be doing now is see if we can all do that together. And the best way that I find of doing that is if we all try to take 5 deep breaths, and don't start just yet. I'm going to give you some more instructions. What's important is that when we're doing the inhale, we're doing it through our nose and we're exhaling through our mouth. Normally when we're not breathing to extremes. So that means that we're never breathing 100% in and never 100% out. It's sort of like we're breathing sort of shallow breathing. In this exercise, we're going to try to inhale 100%. So we have to imagine that our lungs is like a balloon, and we're trying to blow up that balloon as big as we possibly can. And then when we exhale, we try to deflate it 100% as well. And those are actually pretty much the instructions. So all the way in, all the way out. On the inhale, it's in through the nose. On the exhale, it's out through the mouth. And don't think about controlling the exhale. When we are inhaling, we're using energy to sort of like build up air in the balloon. But when we're exhaling, we're not doing anything. We're just deflating. We're just letting go. We don't need to push. So we're going to be doing that 5 times, and we can just start now. So just follow me. So we breathe in through the nose as big as you can, and then all the way in again through the nose. And once it's full, just all the way out. We have 3 more, and exhale. And the last 2 you can do by yourself. And as you're doing them, just notice how your ribs are expanding and how you're feeling energized as you're inhaling. And as you're exhaling, you're noticing how you're deflating. You're noticing how you're crumbling a little bit. You're noticing how your muscles are getting heavier and more relaxed. And again, on the inhale, you notice how the air is cooler when it's coming in. And when you exhale, it's warmer. And I think you all finished that. And did this have an effect on anyone? Is anyone feeling more stressed? Is anyone feeling less stressed? Or is anybody feeling an effect?
It is lightening the body, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some kind of a stress, bodily stress is just going away. It just feels light. I have a question.
Yeah.
We're talking about regulating for adults, but when a child is throwing tantrum, how much tantrum is too much tantrum? When to interrupt? What is the first aid to stop that?
Mm. Really, really good question. And the foundation of being able to answer that question is always, is it a tantrum or is it a meltdown? Because if it's a tantrum, there's always a purpose behind the behavior, meaning that if I'm throwing a tantrum because I want ice cream, if my parent is giving in, essentially I'm learning that tantrum equals ice cream. So that means that if we're giving in to that, we are enforcing that behavior happening again. If we're talking about a meltdown, that's an entirely different beast, because the behavior of a meltdown is no longer that I have a person. The nature of a meltdown is that I've experienced so much throughout the day now, and I'm just absolutely overwhelmed, and I cannot control myself. My nervous system is absolutely overloaded. And when that's the case, that's a difficult situation to deal with, and unfortunately, it's fairly common for the neurodiverse population, especially because there's things that trigger a neurodiverse person that don't trigger a neurotypical person, and the world pretty much is designed for neurotypical people. So that certainly puts the neurodiverse person at a disadvantage in general. But when that's the case, first of all, the way to treat a meltdown is rarely in the situation. The way that we treat a meltdown is before it happens, making sure that as many stresses as we can are reduced in the daily life. So that means accommodations in the classroom, making sure that we know how to talk to that person, and making sure that sensory needs are being met when it happens, and it will inevitably. All we can do is, like, generally the conversations don't really help there. It is in general, especially for the younger ones, about the behavioral strategies. Having a conversation with them when they're regulated about, like, we know that there are times where you simply get so overwhelmed that it's just really, really hard to manage. We know that unfortunately that's going to happen at some point. What can we do here? What kind of room or setup can we have so that when it happens, you can go there and you can self-regulate. So really, when that's the situation, we want to make sure that we're making the strategies before the situation happens. And again, for some people, that's going to the room, punching the bed, screaming out loud, going to the trampoline. It can be a lot of different things, but making sure that we're having those open conversations about, like, I know that there are times where you get really, really overwhelmed and it's painful for me to see. I want to be able to help you there, but I wonder what's the best thing that I can do there for you, and then build up those strategies together. That's the things that will help. The things that absolutely will not help is, again, when I'm trying to take the child that's looking at a 9 and trying to pull them over to my side and take them over to look at the 6. So the person who's on the path to dysregulation will only get more dysregulated if we tell them, no, you shouldn't be upset about this. This is nothing. Like, it's just sounds, it's just noise in the classroom. Because right there, you're putting the situation, or you're putting that person in a situation where they need to act out in order to make you understand how badly they feel. So we're essentially forcing them to act out. And what we should try to do is even though it's hard to understand that they can be triggered so much by these things, we should try to see things from their perspective and accommodate as much as we can to that. Did that answer your question?
Sort of, but my girl, she's 3.5-year-old,
Mm.
and so it's a very tricky age, and
Yeah.
she's so tantrum every now and then. So at that point, yeah, as an adult, I would like to calm down, but first aid for her to cool down at that situation, that's very tricky for me. Like, I sometimes it's out of control, and I'm just sitting and just seeing her, like,
Yeah. To be honest,
conversation.
I'm a little bit out of my depth when it comes to 3.5 years old. Like, the youngest that I work with is 6. But first of all, I will say that some kids have meltdowns, some kids have tantrums, and it can be very, very stressful as a parent to look at that and be in that. It becomes even more stressful if you're putting the pressure on yourself that my child should never be upset and my child should not have a tantrum, because unfortunately that is part of being a child. Most likely, most of us sitting in the room now as adults, as kids, we had tantrums as well. So there are things in life that are unavoidable, and we have to accept that this is part of the age as well, and not be hard on ourselves as parents as to why is this happening, because it is unfortunately just a natural part of being a child at times.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time and I can see that we're almost out here. Just a few more things before we finish off. So I was talking about mindfulness. So this is the breathing technique that we just did is a breathing technique that I do with almost all of my clients, just to see if they respond well to mindfulness. Because if they respond well to this, there's so many techniques that you can do with the breathing and the activating of the senses. So if this works for you or your child, you know that mindfulness is something that I can really, really benefit from. Secondly, especially for people with ADHD. What I do see is I don't know if everybody knows this, but 40% of people with ADHD also experience anxiety, and very often due to a limitation in being able to organize thoughts and oftentimes overthinking or not being able to organize thoughts, people with ADHD have a tendency to overthink and to engage in what we call cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are a general term that is used to describe that sometimes we misinterpret the world as it is, and there are 10 classical distortions. The one that most people can probably relate the most to is jumping to conclusions or mind reading. I can give a fantastic example from my own life. When I was all throughout school, university, all of that, I had a tendency to always tell myself that when I was going to exams, that Remo, you're going to fail. You read 90% of the curriculum, and they are for sure going to ask 90% of the questions are going to be about the 10% that you didn't read. So I was creating all of these scenarios in my head that was causing me stress and anxiety, which made me go into the emotional part of the brain and not the logical part of the brain that I really so needed in the exam situation. The principle here is that my way of thinking was not realistic, relative, or was not aligned with reality. And that caused me unnecessary stress because I was overthinking the situation. Another classic example is magnification or minimization, where we take small mistakes that we did, and we think about those excessively, but at the same time, successes that we had, we tend to not give them attention at all, and that makes a massive impact on your confidence. Another thing, probably the last thing that I'm going to mention here, is should statements. And the should statement that we just saw in the conversation with Samuel, there was that if I have a child who is really, really young, is it possible that they're never going to have a tantrum? And is that a demand that I'm putting on myself? And is that a realistic demand that I'm putting on myself as a parent, that I should be the kind of parent who doesn't have a child who have tantrums, or I should be able to avoid emotional distress for my child? Essentially, that would be fantastic if everybody were able to do that. But unfortunately, the nature of a young child oftentimes is that they have tantrums. That doesn't mean that you're not doing a fantastic job as a parent. That just means that you are a parent with a child. So being able to think realistically to the world around us is what makes us react the most appropriately. And if we're able to do that fairly consistently, which a lot of people with ADHD actually are struggling with, but if we're able to do that, we can.
So other than the famous physicist and mathematician Albert Einstein, I know J.K. Rowling.
Thank you for that, MCME. I also am a big fan of Albert Einstein. But these cognitive distortions are actually made by a guy called David Burns. And when we're able to identify our cognitive distortions in our thinking, catch those and correct them, then we're also able to think in alignment with reality, which reduces stress, anxiety, and increases confidence. The last thing is that if we have experienced any kind of trauma, trauma therapy generally is important. Unfortunately, the neurodiverse population is more prone to experience trauma, and if untreated, it can sort of store itself in the nervous system, which is never really forgotten, and then it has tendency to impact on the future life. Okay, it's 10 o'clock, and I guess I'm gonna stop with the PowerPoint now, and if there are any questions, please feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I'll just say thank you for today, but happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for the session.
Thank you for joining, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel.
Remo, if I can just jump in here on behalf of Angela Gannon and myself and all of us here at Sharjah English School, thank you so much for your time today and for all the knowledge that you have shared and your insights. I think it's been a lot to take in, a lot to consider, but there's been really sort of valuable information and strategies and a lot for us to all go away and think about and hopefully implement with our children and students in the future. So thank you very, very much for your time today.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Namo.
Thank you, Hassan. All right. If no further questions, I just want to say thank you all for today. Thank you for joining, and I hope that you're going to be able to implement any of these techniques in your daily life. In general, what I will say is it really takes some time to get into the habit of, because oftentimes we tend to we see a person in distress and pain, we want to help right here, right now, so we jump right into the solution and the problem solving mode. It takes some time to defer from that habit and create a new one. But when we're able to do that consistently, we're going to reap massive rewards, both in terms of being able to build emotional intelligence, solve emotional distress, but also because there is something unique and magical about being able to help your child regulate, and it really creates a massive connection to the child when they know that every time I come to mom or dad, no matter what state of mind I'm in, if I'm angry, if I'm stressed, if I'm sad, they can help me to feel better. They can help me to make sense of the internal chaos. There are few things in life that create a connection like that. So hopefully you're going to be able to implement some of those techniques and reap the rewards over time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.